ESPN Radio 1392.5 FM. It's the bottom line with Brad Taylor, where cashing tickets is what it's all about. Alongside the best in the business, Angelo Carriero, I'm Brad Taylor. 381-1313 if you want to call us here and talk a little sports here on your Sunday morning. On today's show, Vince Stover of the Sports Stove podcast stops by, and he literally compares Terry Wilson to two quarterbacks I never would have thought he would have compared them to in my lifetime in a million years. You'll have to listen to that to hear it for yourself. And Rob Fetcher of the Kentucky State Fantasy Football Championship gives some outstanding fantasy football draft strategy and information. Believe me, this is top shelf stuff. You won't want to miss this. But first, we are the voice of the Reds here at ESPN Radio 1392.5. And of course, we want to see the Reds do well for obvious reasons. If the Reds do well, more people listen to the station. Duh, that's what we want. We want to see the Reds win. But here on the bottom line with Brad Taylor, we like to tell it like it is. We cut through all the stuff, and we tell you what's really going on. The Reds are 2-5. They're the last place in the National League Central. They've lost 3 of 4 to the Detroit Tigers, a team that went 47 and 114 last year. Although we did make a great pick last week in taking Detroit over Cincinnati. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show. I told you so segment. That was the third worst season in this century, what the Detroit Tigers were last year. So what's happened to the Reds? Along with the White Sox, the Reds were the big sheet pick out in Las Vegas to be the World Series champion. Vinny Magliulo, say that 5 times, the director of the sports book at the South Point Casino in Las Vegas, said he took more action on the Reds to win the World Series, not just the division or the league, the World Series, than any other team, not named the Dodgers or the Yankees. That's high praise indeed. But if the season ended today, the Reds wouldn't even be in the playoffs, where 16 out of 30 teams qualify. So what has gone wrong with this team early in the season? Well, it's not that early. They've already played over 10% of their games, because 7 out of 60 is quite a few in terms of ratio when you compare it to a 162-game season. If you've listened to this show, we've been preaching the entire time the bullpen. And Raisel Iglesias is the key guy. He might be reaching the end of his career already at 30 years old. He's pitched in 2 games, 5 hits, 4 runs, 3 yards, 4 strikeouts. Well, but what good is that with a 13.5 ERA? Is this because he has to enter games in the dreaded non-save situation, and he's a closer? Tony La Russa, who managed the A's back in the 80s, when he got Dennis Eckersley, he ruined baseball forever by giving all these pitchers different roles, because Eckersley would only pitch the 9th inning and get 3 outs and rack up 40-plus saves every year to make it look like he was more dominant than he really was. So blame all this closer stuff on La Russa for the most part. But it's not just Iglesias. Michael Lorenzen has an ERA of 16.88. He's a guy who said before the season, hey, just pitch me every game. No, you have an ERA of 16. We do not want to pitch you every game. And, of course, Cody Reed, who came over in one of those Johnny Cueto multi-mega deals back at the trade deadline a few years ago, his ERA, 18. How they still run him out there is a miracle to me, a miracle to everyone. The team ERA for the Reds, 4.79. And if you take away Sonny Gray's 12 innings of 1 earned run, that ERA skyrockets. It's the pitching, and especially the bullpen, an ERA of 7.46 in 25 innings for this bullpen. Does David Bell know what he's doing? I don't know. Does he have faith in his bullpen? Trevor Bauer threw 100 pitches last Sunday in 6 innings. David Bell ran him out there for the 7th inning. Why? He has no faith in his bullpen. And he was right, because the bullpen blew the game in the 9th inning, and the Reds lost yet another game to the Detroit Tigers. The Reds are hitting .204 on the season. The Reds have seemingly already given up on Eugenio Suarez. He had 49 home runs last year, but this year he started 2 for 25. That's a .080 batting average. And yesterday's lineup, before it was rained out, they've already moved him down to 5th in the lineup. Maybe that's because he went 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts on Friday night, but is it really time to panic on a guy who hit 49 home runs last year, and he batted 3rd all year last season? Is it already time to move him down to 5th? Who knows? But that seems a panic move, it seems like, yet another one, from David Bell. Other things that haven't gone right this year. The Shogo Akiyama move, he's no Ichiro, he's 4 for 19. And that wonderful platoon last year, Jesse Winker, Phillip Ervin, 155 hits last year. They were two of their best 4 hitters, but they played that platoon role out left field. This year, a combined 3 for 27. Now, the bright spots are the guys that they brought in, the Castellanos of the world, the Moustakas of the world. They've all been good so far. But although this team isn't hitting, the main reason for the slow start is the lack of a bullpen and a manager who has no faith in his bullpen whatsoever. And in his second season, David Bell really doesn't know how to use that bullpen. And that is the bottom line.
Seems like one thing that you said was that they've kind of given up on Suarez, a guy that I think had potential to be not only a cornerstone of the organization for the season that he had last year, but a guy that could turn into a potential MVP candidate if the wins followed with this new pitching staff. He could have been a guy that you built the entire program around. By the way, Brad, we have a Reds doubleheader today on ESPN Radio Lex. The pregame starts at 11:40. There will be 2 7-inning games. So let me ask you that, if you don't mind, even though this is your program, do you think that because of the 2 less innings that the Reds have better chances in the betting odds because you don't have to go to your bullpen as much because of the shorter game?
The Tigers have demonstrated they have a much better bullpen than the Reds do so far this year. So a 7-inning game, getting a pitcher like Bauer especially, letting him go 6 innings, now you've only got to get 3 outs at the end instead of getting those 9 outs at the end. A lot more different. Maybe you could run Bauer out there for the 7th and let him finish the game, but you make a good point with the 7-inning doubleheaders. Yes, it helps a team that has a poor bullpen, and the Reds, 29th in the league with that 7.46 bullpen ERA. You're absolutely right, Angelo. That's a dynamite drop in by you. ESPN Radio 1392.5. The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, where cashing tickets is all about. And speaking of cashing tickets, we've got 2 Reds games this afternoon. Game number 1, Anthony DeSclafani versus Ronnie Garcia up in Detroit. Second career start for Garcia, so we don't have a lot of information on him. But if you're talking about mediocre, and I'm looking at Angelo, and I look at him and I think mediocre, that's exactly what Anthony DeSclafani is. In his career, 36 and 37 with a 4.13 ERA. Career OPS, where the average pitcher is 100, his career OPS, 101. Let's look at the money side of it, though. The Reds are 52 and 58 in DeSclafani's 108 career starts. That's a plus 2% return on investment. He's never had a losing season in Vegas since 2015. Of course, he didn't pitch in 2017. On the road, DeSclafani, the Reds are 23 and 28 in his games. That's a plus 4% return on investment. In other words, DeSclafani's about as mediocre as it gets. So if you're looking for an advantage in that game, there's not a whole lot on either side, if you ask me. But game 2, this is one that's going to be very interesting. It seems like Trevor Bauer will be the pitcher in game 2 for the Reds, but he was a little upset yesterday. He was supposed to pitch the game. He warms up 8 minutes before the game starts. No, we're going to call the game off. But Bauer's all ready to go. He's ready to go, and he goes on Twitter after the game, and he tells the world, this is terrible. I can't believe what Major League Baseball is doing. Why do they run me out here? Yeah, he's very upset. So how does he react today? Because as we all know, Trevor Bauer on the social media, he's very outspoken, as outspoken as any player in Major League Baseball. But he's not facing Steven Turnbull like he did last week when you had a decided advantage with Turnbull over Bauer in terms of the history. Bauer's still terrible against Detroit, 10-10, negative 16% ROI after last week. With the Reds, if you're putting all your jelly beans on Bauer every week, minus 36% return on investment because he's 3-8. But if his opposing starter today, Daniel Norris, not much better himself. He's 31 and 45 with Detroit, and at home he is a negative 50% return on investment. He's 10 and 28. If you bet $1 on Daniel Norris at Detroit Tigers starts at home in his career, here's a stats you won't get anywhere else, Angelo. You are $1, just $1 per game. You're down $19.03. Not exactly who you want to invest in. The way we're going today, they've been having storms up in Detroit. The wind seems to be blowing strong and blowing out. So we kind of like the overs in the game today. So if you're looking for a little action on the Reds games today, especially that first game with DeSclafani and a guy who's only had one career start, let's go the over the run totals in those games. Those are your Mac Daddy Stogies for today. Go over in both games.
It sounds like, if anything, too, you probably would want to bet if there's a line on home runs combined for both teams. If it's blowing out and the ball carries, you might want to take the over on whatever that is for today.
Stat of the day, trend of the day. When the wind is blowing out at over 10 miles an hour, the over hits 54% of the time in any game, any stadium. Rolling your eyes, but hey, that's a 2,000 game sample size. You're hitting 54% return on investment. About 4%, but still, over time, that's how you grind out winners. That's how you put a few extra jelly beans in your pocket, Angelo. I'm here to try to help the public. I'm a man of the people. I'm the Robin Hood trying to steal from the books and give to the people. That's what we're all about here on The Bottom Line. ESPN Radio 1300 and 92.5. It is The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, where cashing tickets is all about. The NBA is back. I know Angelo, who loves the NBA, he's very excited about that. Zion Williamson has already lost 2 games. My little Pelicans to make the playoffs ticket does not look very good right now. I don't feel very good. I felt pretty good about it 4 days ago. I don't feel very good about it at all now. Apparently, he was with Lou Williams at Magic City. Of course, Lou Williams gets, ignored by everybody. But we don't know where Zion went. But, come on back. He only played 14 minutes last night. What's up with that, Angelo?
Oh, that's something I'm definitely going to be talking about here shortly in the 10 o'clock hour. Just my immense frustration going on with the way the New Orleans Pelicans are managing Zion Williamson's minutes. I just will say this. When you say that Zion has lost 2 games, I would say that Zion is not the reason why the Pelicans are losing these games. If anything, his scoring ability. You look like I have 2 heads or something when I say that. How can a guy that only plays the first 3 minutes of all 4 quarters be the reason you're losing the games?
Could they be tanking? Could they be trying to get in the little playoff ping pong ball so they could possibly, in a conspiracy among all conspiracies, the NBA known for conspiracies, could they be trying to get into not a playoff spot to get that first little ping pong ball that appears when they pull out the number 1 pick?
Absolutely not.
No conspiracies?
That's too. I love conspiracies.
I do too.
Not even close.
You're going to learn, Angelo. We love conspiracies on this show. Patrick Ewing. Have you heard of that theory?
Who's the Patrick Ewing in this draft?
I don't know.
Okay, so let's not let's slow down. Oh, Zion Williamson can't be the reason why a team loses when he only plays the first 3 minutes of a quarter. And I'll tell you what, like I say, in the next hour, I'll tell you why that Utah Jazz game will come back to bite the Pelicans in the end.
Make sure to tune in to Angelo. He's got a great show planned. He's already talked to me about some stuff that he's got. 10 o'clock right after this show here, Angelo will have a wonderful show on tap. He's going to talk a lot of stuff about UK basketball that we may not touch on in this game, in this show. But yeah, I like the NBA back. I'm not shocked at all that the Lakers pull up a tanker against the Raptors last night after the big win over the Clippers. The old letdown game, but that's neither here nor there. We'll talk more about NBA later and who this TJ Warren guy is who got 53 points. Never heard of, well, I've heard of him, but I didn't think he had 53 points in him. But that's neither here nor there. Coming up after the break, we've got Vince Stover of the Sports Stove Podcast. He's going to join us here on ESPN Radio 1300 and 92.5. But first, Clark's Auto Service has the answer to all your auto service needs. Our good friend Bill Clark and his staff, they haven't missed a day of work since the pandemic hit, and I can attest for myself that their work is top shelf. I have a car with over 200,000 miles on it. Yes, I have a car that old, Angelo, older than you. And Bill fixed it right up, and it runs as well as it ever has. I couldn't recommend anyone more for your car service needs. That's Clark's Auto Service, 764 Westland Drive, and the number is 859-253-1278. Check them out online, ClarksAutoLexington.com. Vince Stover, the Sports Stove Podcast, coming up next here on The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor on ESPN Radio 1300 and 92.5.
T.I.P. champion. Hey, Shawty, why you gotta act like that? I'm saying, I'm just trying to
ESPN Radio 1300 and 92.5. The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, where cashing tickets is what it's all about. Our next guest is the host of the Sports Stove Podcast. He's our good friend, Vince Stover. Vince, how are you this morning, buddy?
I'm doing great, Brad. Good to be with you.
Are you loving this baseball season so far?
But it's been nice to be able to be watching sports again, and baseball has been one of those things where I love it. It's been great to have it back.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked a lot of people. Do you think we're going to make it through all 60 games this season?
I think we'll get through. No, I think we'll get through a season, but I think it'll end up being short of 60 games. They're going to have to figure it out to work it out because everything hitting right now with the COVID and everything happening, all the talks that are going to be going on, they won't get 60 games in.
The crazy thing about this, baseball, they're trying to get a football season in. Baseball, you don't really have contact with other people. Football, you're hitting guys on every play. How do they expect football teams to not have outbreaks of this virus when baseball teams are, and they're not even in physical contact with each other?
Yeah, the issue is really responsibility between the players. I mean, the Marlins situation, they came out with a report that said the guys were out at the bars, they were out partying, they were going out and doing whatever they wanted to do. The issue isn't playing baseball. The issue is what you're doing when you're not playing baseball. And to this point, baseball's not done well with this. Football, they're getting the talking to every single day. You're not allowed to do anything. Just come to work and go home.
Yeah, I think they had a trip to Magic City as well, just like Lou Williams of the NBA. Of course, he went there for the wings, as we all know.
Oh, yeah.
I think he also went for the thighs and breasts, but that's another story altogether. Thank you very much. I learned everything I needed to know about baseball on opening night when they had a rain delay, and then they go back to ESPN and A-Rod. They ask A-Rod, hey, who do you think's going to make the World Series, A-Rod? He goes, Yankees and Dodgers. Oh, how about a dark horse? Oh, the Astros. Those are the three favored teams out in Las Vegas. Can you step out on a limb, A-Rod? That's another story for another day. But the Reds, as of right now, 13.3% of their season is done. Steven Turnbull, the Detroit Tigers pitcher, went 3-17 last year. He's 2-0 against the Reds this year. And the Reds bullpen, their ERA is over 7 right now, 29th out of 30 teams. What do you make of this big red machine here on the Voice of the Reds at ESPN Radio?
I really thought the Reds were going to compete in the Central. I had them and the Brewers at the top this year with the Cubs falling off, but the Cubs bullpen is not good, but it's better than the Reds apparently from how everything turned out there. The Reds pitching is obviously their weakest point right now. They've got some offense there. They've actually had really good offense for the most part this season so far. But for every team in Major League Baseball this year in a shortened season, it's all about the bullpen, and the Reds have just been horrible.
You said you were a Brewers fan.
I am a Brewers fan, yep.
Christian Yelich, 1 for 27. Give up on him?
Oh, no.
No?
No.
He's only won the batting average title 2 years in a row. I'm
Right.
ready to jump ship already. Are you?
I'm not ready to jump
No?
ship yet on Yelich, no.
ESPN Radio 1392.5. The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, here with Vince Stover of the Sports Stove Podcast. College football. The powers that be of the SEC claim that there's now going to be a 10-game conference schedule. Your thoughts on that conference schedule and maybe what it says for Kentucky's chances to have a winning season, Vince Stover.
I think when you're talking about just SEC games now, this hurts Kentucky very much. They are the 8 games they already have scheduled in the SEC. They've got 4 games that they should win and maybe a 5th, possibly 6th game that they could possibly win. And now you're looking at adding 2 more SEC games. It's not looking good. I think the line has to be at 5 right now for Kentucky.
Did you really just say Kentucky was going to finish 6-2 in the SEC?
No.
You didn't. I heard the number 6 come out of your mouth, Vince Stover.
They have, in their 8 games right now, they've got 4 games that they should win, and then a possibility of 2 other games that they could win. I think they'll lose one of those 4 games they should win, and then they might be able to pick up a game in one of those 2 that they could possibly win.
But you're setting the number at 5 right now.
Yes.
This was before the 10-game schedule was announced. We're talking about the 8 on the schedule. You say 5. Is that what you're telling me?
I think with the 8 on the schedule, the line should be 4. And then adding 2 more games, I'd give them 1 more game.
I think it's 4. I don't think there's any chance of them going to Florida and winning. They're not going to Auburn and winning. They're not going to win against Georgia. And they can't go to Tennessee and win, even though your boy, Garantano, he's even worse than Terry Wilson. And that's saying something because you know how terrible I am on talking about Terry Wilson. But that's another story altogether. I've got Kentucky at best 4-4 in the SEC. Let's say they do add. The myth was LSU and Ole Miss, they were going to be the teams added in. Do you think that this means that Kentucky can go 5-5 in the SEC, Vince Stover?
I think that you always have to look at it as there's got to be one game that they're not supposed to win that they pull off. That's why I would give them the 5 wins there. If you're asking me to go over 5, I'd have a hard time with that. But I think 5 is probably that number.
If they do add LSU and Ole Miss, I guess I say 5 because they might get Ole Miss depending on where they would play Ole Miss. But nothing more than 5 because they're not beating LSU for sure. But this is, at best right now, this was a 4-4 SEC team this year for me.
Yeah, I think if they add LSU and Ole Miss, then you're talking about the 5th game they're going to win is either going to be Tennessee or Ole Miss. I don't think it's going to be any of those other teams.
How come Kentucky can go 475 miles to play Auburn, but yet they can't go 75 miles to play Louisville?
I think the SEC is seeing their pockets are going to be lined better with just playing SEC games. And so it's going to be easier in that sense there. I mean, the ACC seemed to open the door to let Louisville play Kentucky, but the SEC, they've shut that down. They're just going to keep it in conference. It doesn't make sense. None of it does.
Big Blue Nation doesn't realize this yet. They got a break when the conference told them, you don't have to go play Louisville. Louisville was going to win that game. The Desert would have had Louisville favored if the game was played today. I've got the better quarterback. I know that for sure. I've got home field. I've got revenge. And I've probably, and this is arguable, I've probably got the better team in Louisville.
I think Kentucky would have beaten Louisville this year. I think Louisville's getting stronger. They're building back up. But I still think this was the year. Kentucky's got a lot of juniors and seniors playing this year. They're a prepared team. The coaching staff made the adjustments last year, did what needed to be done. I think they've got it set up to win again this year. Obviously, we won't know for sure what would have happened, but I think this year might be the last year in the next couple Kentucky had a chance to beat Louisville.
So if I set the over-under for Kentucky SEC wins this year at 5.5, now with a 10-game schedule and assuming we have LSU and Ole Miss added, 5.5 is the number I'm setting, over or under, Vince Stover.
I think the bottom line here has to be under. I've got it at 5. I would not risk. I mean, I don't gamble, but I would not put my money on 6 wins for Kentucky.
So let me do some math. You had 5 before they added 2 games, and now you're going to say with the 2 teams added in, they're going to lose both of them. Is that what you're telling me?
I think they had 5 possible with an 8-game schedule. You add in the 2 other games, I just don't see it. And I mean, unless they get Arkansas, I think 5's the number.
I think everybody wants Arkansas at this point.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody want Arkansas more. ESPN Radio 1392.5. It's The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, with Vince Stover from the Sports Stove Podcast. So with this Kentucky football schedule, you really think they're going to take down South Carolina in Lexington and Mississippi State in Lexington? I know with Mississippi State, I've got the better quarterback in Costello. I know that for sure. You think Kentucky can win these winnable games at home, although they won't be favored by more than a field goal in either one of these?
Yeah, I think Mississippi State is probably the one that is questionable in the 4 games that I think they should win. Because you got Vanderbilt, you've got Missouri, and you've got South Carolina, games that I think they should win. And Mississippi State, I included in that. But Mississippi State has the new coach, new system. What will Mike Leach do? How much will it impact it in season 1? That's really the question that you have to ask when you're talking about that game in particular. So it's a little bit up in the air. But, you know, I think we've got to see progress in Terry Wilson this year. If you go back to his last full season in 2018, you know, not all of his numbers were great, but his winning numbers were great. And to me, I was trying to think about quarterbacks he could compare to, and I came back to college football's Alex Smith back when he was in Utah. To me, the skill set is somewhat similar. He's got to use his legs. He's got to be effective with his legs. I think if you put Alex Smith in the SEC, his numbers would be closer to Terry Wilson's in college. And if you put Terry Wilson in Utah back then in Urban Meyer's system, I think his numbers would be better than they are right now. Maybe not quite up to Alex Smith. But that's where I kind of think the player he needs to look at and model his game around and can be effective here in this season in college football.
Did you just compare Terry Wilson to Alex Smith, a quarterback who went undefeated at the University of Utah and then was the number 1 overall draft pick in the NFL, drafted ahead of your hero, Aaron Rodgers? Did you just make that comparison, Vince Stover?
Make this clear. Comparing him to college, he's not going to be the number 1 draft pick. Terry Wilson probably won't even be an NFL quarterback.
Probably.
But when you're talking about college football and the things that you can do within a system, I mean, his numbers are identical, Terry Wilson's, with Charlie Ward's numbers back in the late 80s, early 90s. And Charlie Ward was an effective college football quarterback and obviously not an NFL quarterback.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Vince Stover just compared Terry Wilson to a number 1 overall NFL draft pick and a Heisman Trophy winner. Good times must be ahead for Kentucky, because if those are correct comparisons, I can't sit here and argue against them. ESPN Radio 1392.5, The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, here with Vince Stover of the Sports Stove Podcast. Nationally, with this new college football schedule where it's just conference games, do you think there's one team or one conference that benefits the most from only playing conference games?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at the top, Clemson has to be one of those teams. The ACC, there are some good teams in the ACC, some okay teams maybe in the ACC, but Clemson not having to go out and play anybody outside of their conference, they probably benefit the most from this, leave them right up there at the top. I mean, the Big Ten is going to be relatively tough at the top as well. Then you go out west, and maybe Oregon has some benefit there as well. But outside of that, I would say Clemson and Oregon probably the 2 teams benefit the most.
You mentioned the magic word, the Oregon Ducks, because the biggest obstacle on their schedule was Ohio State. Now they don't have to play Ohio State and they're favored literally in every conference game this year. So Oregon gets the big break in not having to play against Ohio State this year and helps them make the playoff. Now, whether they'll do anything in the playoffs is a completely different story, but Oregon benefits the most from this whole pandemic scheduling faux pas. Speaking of scheduling, the NFL, they're now in training camp. You are a devout Green Bay Packers fan. Your thoughts of the NFL season taking place and your beloved, using that term very loosely, Green Bay Packers.
I'm excited about the NFL season. We've got some of the best quarterbacks all around in the league than there's been in a while, which makes for a good league. And I think the season's going to go off without a hitch for the most part. I don't think they're going to cancel any games. They seem really set up for it. They're letting all the other leagues make the mistakes so they can come in and do it correctly. And then, if you want to talk about the Packers, I could talk for hours, but they've got they've got a pretty easy division this year. And it's just going to come down to whether or not Aaron Rodgers is willing to be coached or if he's just going to try to do it on his own.
Vegas says 9 wins total for the Packers this year, over or under?
I think 9's a good number, but I think 10 is probably where they're at, so I'd go over.
There's 3 quarterbacks in this league I do not bet against. Tom Brady has hit 61% of his games against the spread in his career. Aaron Rodgers, 58%. Drew Brees, 56%. Those are the 3 quarterbacks I will not bet against. Pretty much, no matter what, you better have a lot going for you on the other side if you want me to go against those quarterbacks. But speaking of quarterbacks, the NFL Top 100 list came out this week. Lamar Jackson's number 1. Russell Wilson's number 2. Patrick Mahomes is number 4 behind those other 2 quarterbacks. Now, how does that happen?
That one I don't understand at all. And, I've seen Mahomes 1, Wilson 2, and a lot of things. Lamar Jackson, as an athlete, great. As if you put him on another team in a different system, he's not going to have the same success. But he is in a perfect situation. He is a great football player, and he's fun to watch. I'm all for him, but Patrick Mahomes has to be number 1 on the list right now.
ESPN Radio 1392.5. The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, where cashing tickets is what it's all about. Here with our good friend Vince Stover of the Sports Stove Podcast. Vince, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can we find your podcast, and where can we find you on social media?
All right, you can find the Sports Stove Podcast on Apple or Spotify or Stitcher, and then you can find me on Twitter at Sports Stove. Brad, thanks for letting me come on today. Sure enjoyed it and loving the show so far.
I appreciate that very much. You'll come on again sometime?
Anytime you want me to.
We haven't scared you away yet?
Not yet.
Well, that day's coming, believe me. Thanks again to Vince Stover for joining us here on The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor on ESPN Radio 1392.5. Coming up after the break, we'll talk with Rob Fetcher of the KFFSC. We're going to talk fantasy football, unlike anything you've ever heard in this town before. But first, J&R Construction. Jimmy Skinny McKinney, our good friend, his award-winning home remodeling company now offers virtual appointments online. Yes, now you don't even have to get out of your house. You can just go online and Jimmy Skinny McKinney will tell you everything you need to know about your home improvement needs. At J&R Construction, Jimmy helps everyone enjoy the process because relationships matter, amen to that, and customer service and quality come first. That's J&R Construction, 633 West Main Street in Lexington, 859-225-0162, and you can check him out online, jrcsi.com. Rob Fetcher of the KFFSC coming up after the break right here on ESPN Radio 1392.5. ESPN Radio 1392.5 FM. The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, where cashing tickets is all about. And speaking of cashing tickets, that's what our next guest does quite a bit at the KFFSC, the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. He is the host, or co-host, of the KFFSC podcast with our good friend Farrell Elliott. He's our old pal, Rob Fetcher. Rob, how are you doing today, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing great, Brad. Glad to talk to you. It's been a while. I'm so looking forward to the football season, and obviously August is the fantasy football season, so can't wait for that.
Now, you've been playing the KFFSC for a long time now, and I know you've taken home a lot of trophies. Tell us about that experience and how it's kind of changed you a little bit.
You know, I've been doing it for 15 years. Started out before that in a lot of local leagues with buddies and, just playing for fun, and heard about Farrell's League and got involved, and it's just made me so much more competitive, so much more fine-tuned on it. And the KFFC is so much fun. I mean, I've met so many new people, different strategies, and just talking about the business. And it makes you a better player when you are honing your skills against all these people from all across the United States who come here to Southern Indiana to draft at Caesars.
Yeah, I get a lot of people that have asked me. People don't ask me about my new show. People ask me, hey, tell me about that commercial about the fantasy football. I want to be the best fantasy football player in the state of Kentucky. I get more reaction to that commercial than I get to my show. That says a lot about my show, but that's neither here nor there, Rob Fetcher. That's no need for cheap shots right there. Let's talk about the actual league and drafting strategy itself. I know you and I, years gone by, we used to have arguments about who should draft, how you should draft, and things of that nature. It was always a lot of fun. Tight ends this year. I remember one year a long time ago, I took Rob Gronkowski and Jimmy Graham back-to-back, end of round 1, beginning of round 2, something like that. And people looked at me like I'm crazy. And as much as things change, they stay the same in fantasy football. You were talking to me about this off the air. Your strategy for drafting tight ends this year, the Travis Kelce's of the world, the George Kittles of the world, and Farrell's favorite whipping boy himself, Zach Ertz. I used to give him a hard time over that all the time. Your strategy for drafting tight ends, especially in the KFFSC for the coming season?
You know, you can never go wrong with Kelsey and Kittle. I mean, those guys are talented. And in almost all formats, you get them, it helps in your 12-team division. But my strategy is more like the quarterback. It's a specific position. You know, quarterback and tight end, you're only going to play them one, and unless tight end, you're going to play the X position. But my strategy is kind of go later. Get 2 mid-round guys that you can think will blow up. 2 years ago, we had Eric Ebron, who moved on to the Colts, had a 13-touchdown season. Last year, you had Austin Hooper, who going 10th round and was a top 5 tight end. And I think there's guys like that out this year that if you can get 2 of them in the 10th and the 11th round, it gets you better wide receivers and running backs up there where you have to take a Kittle or a Kelsey. And some of the guys I'm looking at, Hayden Hurst, a first-round pick who's now moved on from Baltimore, and he's kind of taken Hooper's place there in Atlanta where there are so many targets because people are worried about Julio and Calvin Ridley. Some other young guys that are coming up. Noah Fant had a great late season with quarterback Drew Lock. T.J. Hawkinson in Detroit, second-year guy. You get 2 of those 3, maybe throw in a Jared Cook in there if you need to, and I think you have a better chance of winning bigger leagues, especially in the KFFSC where you're going against multiple divisions.
And you're going to have to spend at least a second-round draft pick on the Kelce's and the Kittles of the world, right?
You definitely are. They're such high-production guys, and that costs you a running back or wide receiver that you could have there, maybe a Julio Jones in the second round or an Allen Robinson in the third round, or some running backs like a Gordon or Gurley who could have good seasons in new places.
ESPN Radio 1392.5 FM. This is The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor and Rob Fetcher from the KFFSC podcast. You're getting some top-shelf fantasy football information right now, ladies and gentlemen. I can promise you that. Farrell last week told me about your opinion on Michael Thomas, the receiver from New Orleans. How early should he be taken in these drafts? Because I will be honest, for my money, he's as good as anybody in this draft outside of Christian McCaffrey.
He definitely is, and with the targets that he gets, he's been going mainly about the 4th pick of the first round, maybe 5th. It's funny, in the last week, though, so much has changed. I could see by the time of late August when we're drafting at Caesars, he could go as low as 7th or 8th. I think his ADP right now 4 or 5. But it could go later. Two bits of information really came clearer this week. One, Damon Williams in Kansas City opted out. Clyde Harris, the Kansas City running back, blowing up the boards. We had a draft masters last night where he went 5th. Also, Dalvin Cook, a lot of the uncertainty about will he report or not. He's coming in. He took his test. He's going to move up. That slides Michael Thomas down a little bit, and I think smart people, and like our KFFSC, where you can target your draft spot, are going to go for that 6th, 7th spot. Hope they get Thomas. If they don't, then Derrick Henry or Dalvin Cook is there.
I couldn't agree more. The Michael Thomas thing, I wouldn't mind taking him 2nd. Now, but like you said, if I could get him at 4, I'll take him at 4. If I get him at 5, I'll take him there too. But for my money, he's as valuable as anybody outside of Christian McCaffrey. And speaking of McCaffrey, let's just talk KFFSC for a minute. And I addressed this with Farrell last week too. How can you draft him number 1 knowing that in your league championship game, you've got to let him sit down on a bye week while all your other players have to fight for your big $1,000 game there?
It's a very interesting concept with these Week 13 buys, especially with our Week 12 and 13 playoffs. I've seen 2 different ways to do this. Like, you can get into the playoffs through week 1 and 11. And when I mean playoffs, I don't mean your division playoffs. We're playing for the big prize, the main event prize, 14 through 16. One of the best ways to get there is to have most points or best records week 1 through 11. If you take that strategy, somebody like McCaffrey doesn't have a bye week. That brings that total points, brings that record up. Yes, you may take a hit in the division, but again, a lot of us are playing for that big trophy, the $15,000 over the $1,000. So in some instances, McCaffrey is actually a better play because he has that late bye.
ESPN Radio 1392.5 FM. The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor. This is A-plus fantasy football information right here from Rob Fetcher from the KFFSC podcast. You mentioned him earlier, Damian Williams. He opts out. Edwards-Helaire, he's the new taste of the month in terms of running backs. I saw him going late first, early second rounds in these drafts that I looked at their average draft position over the weekend. Are you a believer in this kid who's never taken a snap in the NFL being a number 1 draft pick in a fantasy football league?
I am not going to draft him in that, where you're going to have to take him. I think it's too much draft capital to give up. I would much rather go with a Derrick Henry, a Michael Thomas, or a Dalvin Cook because they're known commodities, and especially this year where there's going to be no preseason games, I want to go with the known commodity. Throw in the fact that Andy Reid has a history of splitting those carries up, and he has guys, Darrell Williams behind it, that have played and have taken snaps, and he's going to give it. He wants his running back to be in top-notch shape in the playoffs because Kansas City's not playing for the number 1 seed. They're playing for the Super Bowl championship. And I think that leads him to do more of a running back share, running back by committee, which I don't want a running back by committee running back as my first-round pick.
Lamar Jackson, he won a lot of fantasy leagues last year, mainly because he was great, but also because of where you were able to get him in drafts, the value where you got him. Are you one of these people that waits forever to get a quarterback until the mid-rounds, or do you like to maybe spend the dollar, get the Lamar Jacksons and Patrick Mahomeses of the world a little bit earlier than most?
I treat it just like the tight end position, and I have the same strategy. I loved Lamar Jackson last year. This year, I'm going to stay away. I would rather get that top-end running back or wide receiver in the second or third round, which is where you're going to have to draft him. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to draft Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to draft Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Matt Ryan's in that group. You get 2 of those 5. Yes, they're not going to score as much as Lamar Jackson and not have that 40-point game, but I think over the 16 weeks, you're going to get value at that. Again, Julio Jones or Melvin Gordon, Todd Gurley, Allen Robinson type guy you've got instead of taking Lamar Jackson.
He's as good as it gets talking fantasy football in this state, ladies and gentlemen. He's Rob Fetcher of the KFFSC podcast. Rob, tell us where we can find you on social media and on your podcast.
You can find on Facebook, Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. Farrell puts all the podcasts up there. You can go to the website, kffsc.com. I know Farrell's still signing up people for Cincinnati, which I believe is August 22nd, up at the Jack's Casino, or again, we'll be at Caesars the next weekend, August 28th through 30th. Anybody that's not sure about signing up, give Farrell a call, 502-523-5057. That's 502-523-5057. I can tell you from experience, I've played in a ton of leagues, not only local, but national. There's not a guy that puts on a better event than Farrell Elliott. There's so much fun. I mean, he brings in cheerleaders. He does a big speech, hands out trophies, makes you feel like you have a one-on-one connection, and introduces you to people from all across the fantasy world, guys that play for big-time bucks. Will set across from you, and you'll get to draft against them. And you'll find out how good you are.
Couldn't have said it any better myself, Rob. Hey, thanks for joining us this morning on The Bottom Line here on ESPN Radio.
Oh, thank you, Brad. It's great catching up with you. We'll see you over at Caesars.
We'll do it again soon, and I'll see you in a few weeks. You got it, buddy. Thank you. Coming up after the break, more sports talk, your phone calls, 381-1313. Give us a call. Let us know what you think about the show. And, of course, the most profitable segment in Lexington radio, the Mac Daddy Stogie Picks of the Day. But first, today is the best time in years to go out and purchase a house. Interest rates are at record-breaking low rates, and our good friend Trey McCauley of Best Lexington Homes can help you find the home of your dreams today. Trey's got a perfect 5-star rating on Zillow, has 17 years of experience in real estate, and I can speak from personal experience. He's as good as it gets in the real estate landscape. So call my good friend Trey McCauley today, 859-312-7599. That's 859-312-7599. Or check him out online, bestlexingtonhomes.com. More to come on ESPN Radio 1392.5 FM. ESPN Radio 1392.5 FM. The Bottom Line with Brad Taylor, where cashing tickets is what it's all about. Coming up after this show, Angelo Carriero will have his show coming up. Tell us what's coming up on your show, Angelo.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Winion Gabriel, John Calipari conflict that's had a lot of buzz, especially on social media, Winion Gabriel's comments about the program, and you'll kind of get to hear the way I see it in the entire conversation between the two, or lack thereof, of a conversation. I'm going to hit on some news, just some topical points, especially talking about Joe Burrow signed with the Bengals. What does that mean for their season? We got LeBron Kawhi the other night in the Lakers-Clippers, which I think everybody wants to see in the Western Conference Finals, is those two teams going at it. And definitely talk about Zion and the minutes restriction. Then get into some NBA awards, because the voting does not include the 8 games. It's just what everything from March 11th and before. So I'm going to give out my awards for the NBA season.
He may be a mediocre producer, ladies and gentlemen, but he's one of the best in the business behind the microphone. That's Angelo Carriero. Hey, quick lightning round type questions.
Let's go.
Who's this kid that scored 53 points last night?
TJ Warren is a guy that I think even in college, if I believe correctly, he was at NC State. He's always been a scorer. And actually, if you listen to ESPN programming, you can hear the Dan Le Batard show Monday through Friday from 10 to 1. And Dan Le Batard said less than 2 weeks ago to Stu Gatz that TJ Warren could not get you 40 any night. Stu Gatz, he said he could. And guess what? Stu Gatz, as always, right. Am I right?
Angelo calling people out here on the Bottom Line with Brad Taylor. Really quick, Kentucky football wins on the season. They're playing 10 games now, over or under 5.5?
Under.
Very good. How many do you say?
I would say either 4 or 5.
That's a good. See, now you're starting to think my way, Angelo.
Yep.
I've started to rub off on you. You're still not in the Terry Wilson fan club, or are you?
Who isn't? I mean, I guess Terry Wilson's a great kid. I don't know who necessarily thinks that he can lead Kentucky to the SEC East championship.
Well, there's a lot of people out there, believe me. I hear from a lot of them, too. Matthew Stafford, speaking of quarterbacks that are underachievers, Matthew Stafford, he has the COVID-19. Are the Lions screwed again?
The Lions are always screwed.
Yes, they are.
It's a perpetual state that they live in.
We're going to move to Washington, D.C. You know why?
Why is that?
The new arena, the Capital One Arena there, they now have a sports book. Live in the arena you can go to during games. A sports book in an arena during live basketball action. Does life get any better than that?
Good thing I don't gamble on sports, because I would lose all of my money. Unless I start listening to you. And then maybe I will make a couple of... I hate when you say jelly beans, though. I know that's your thing. I hate it. Everybody has their saying coin, jelly beans, or something. But maybe I would have a couple more beans in my pocket.
You're starting to come over to the dark side, Angelo. We're going to gradually come over
here.
And see, if you did listen, players out in the desert won against the sports books for the first time in 83 months in the month of June. Did you get in on any of that action?
Absolutely not.
No?
I would have been the one person that swung it to Vegas.
Russian ping pong and Korean baseball. That didn't help you out in the month of June?
Doesn't ring much of a bell. I will say that you won your bet last week in the Detroit Tigers-Cincinnati Reds game. If you load up your stogie, you would have been able to enjoy it, because your Tigers line hit.
He's still a mediocre producer, but boy, that was a great segue. The Mac Daddy Stogies, Reds and Tigers, a double header today, ladies and gentlemen. These pitchers are tough to call. We don't know where Trevor Bauer's at mentally and physically. Let's go over in both those games. We see the weather forecast is calling for wind blowing out, especially in that game one with a rookie pitcher in DeSclafani, the master of mediocrity, just like Angelo behind the ones and twos here. We'll go over in both those games. We're going to give a little NBA action, Angelo. This is for you. Houston getting 4.5 against the Bucks. Give me Houston and James Harden with a chip on his shoulder. Give me Houston getting some points against the Bucks tonight. And give me Popovich and the Spurs going up against Memphis, one of the most overrated teams in the league. I'm getting 4.5 with the Spurs against Memphis, too. So I'm getting 4.5 points with Houston over the Bucks and the Spurs over Memphis. Your thoughts on those two?
I would go the other way, but that's what we're going to see tonight. The more that you're right, the more I can come in the program and start going to your side. By the way, did you say the Reds have a doubleheader today?
Reds have a doubleheader. The first game starts at 1 o'clock.
And that's crazy because you can hear the pregame for the Reds doubleheader today at 11:40 right here on ESPN Sports Radio 1392.5 FM. 2 7-inning games, and we will be carrying both contests. So if you're out driving around or at home and you want to hear a good audio program, you can tune in right here on ESPN Sports Radio 1300 and 92.5 FM.
Dynamite drop in. All wall-to-wall, all-day baseball here on 1300 and 92.5 FM. And if you're looking for one more little Mac Daddy Stogie, how about going against Clayton Kershaw at Arizona's Day? Just a little thought for the road. Yeah, just go against them. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. Follow us on Twitter at BottomLineLex. Make sure to tune in again next Sunday at 9 o'clock for more actionable sports information.